Okay, so my name's David Barker. I've been in Japan for, I keep trying to work it out and I get confused. It's either 26 or 28 years, one of the two. I've been here a long time. Um, I've been teaching in universities since, I think, 2000, 1999 or 2000. Again, a long time. I was a teacher before I came here. I used to teach in Singapore, and I had a year away working in New Zealand, also teaching. I'm from the UK originally, but I haven't been back since before COVID, so kind of forgetting that part of my heritage.
Right.
That's me, really.
Okay. So you're a veteran, longtime resident of Japan. You've got
I
lots of
am,
experience
yeah.
at the university level mostly.
Yeah, I began as an ALT. I was an ALT in Sapporo for 2 years, and then I went away and I came back and at university since then, I think.
Okay. And you've written several books. Is that correct?
Yeah, my the first book I ever wrote wasn't really a textbook. It was like a compendium of mistakes that Japanese learners make, and that was published by Alc Press in Tokyo, and that became a national bestseller back in I think 2002 or 2003. And then there were a few follow-ups to that. So I think I did four or five altogether with Alc. And then I moved into publishing my own stuff. And the main reason was that Alc didn't want to publish textbooks. They wanted to publish books that people would buy to read. But the books that I wanted to use I wanted books that I could use in the classroom.
Right.
And that was a different thing. So actually, one of my books that I published myself was it was a kind of rearranged version of the Alc book, but it was made for teachers and students to use together. So obviously, when you're making a book for somebody to just read by themselves, and you're making a book for someone for a teacher to use with students, it's different.
Right.
So the idea of publishing it myself was to be able to put the same material into a different format, I guess.
Okay. So you're saying like Alc wanted to have books for reference, like maybe reference books rather than
They used to
textbooks.
call them a yomimono, which is kind of strange for a book, but that what they mean is it's just something you read. So it couldn't be too, it had to be, that's the way to describe it. It couldn't be dry. It had to be something interesting that people would pick up and enjoy reading.
I
Um,
see.
Whereas for a textbook, you don't really need that. That's the teacher's job to kind of get the students interested. I needed the material separate from the narrative, really, as it were.
Right. So you didn't think about going with like a different local publisher that did publish textbooks. You wanted to publish independently?
Um, yeah, I, I think originally it started because I'd made, I think the first book I did was a vocabulary book, and I'd made a list of words, the top 2,000 words, but I'd put all the translations and the parts of speech and the syllable patterns and everything in. And a few people said they wanted to use it and said to me, where can I get this? And so it wasn't really I decided to publish. It was people were asking me, where can I get this? And I thought, well, I could, just send you a PDF and you print it out, but the teachers don't really want to do that. So I thought, well, why not? I'll just publish it because I know I'll publish enough for these teachers and they will buy it and they will use it. And that was how it began, really.
Okay, so let's actually get into the book. Actually, I have a copy of it. Read to Write,
Right, okay.
and it is the second edition, I believe.
Right. So um what I'm talking about today really is the Read to Write third edition, which will be coming next year and is it's just in the final touches are going into it now.
Oh,
Uh,
fantastic.
it's the same idea, but there was an original Read to Write, and then that sold pretty well, and then I updated it with a second edition, and then it's basically a process of just trying to make it better, trying to put more stuff in for teachers, really. So this third edition, the big difference with the third edition is that As I explained before, I write about the mistakes that Japanese learners make when they're learning English,
Right.
and why they make them. What used to be called language interference or cross-linguistic influence. So stuff like, I play with my friends. Okay, we don't say that in English, but I can see why you've made that mistake because in Japanese you would say tomodachi to asobu. So
Right.
it was kind of a mix of my own learning of Japanese mixed with what I knew about English. And that was my first book with Alk. And then I ended up, I wrote newspaper columns and stuff about this, and I just kept collecting more and more of these mistakes. And I ended up making a big book called the A to Z of Common English Errors.
Right. I've seen that book. It's fantastic.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Okay, well, what's new in Read to Write is that I've taken chunks out of that and put them into the book. So basically now every model paragraph comes with a, by the way, don't make this mistake. So
Okay. And in the model paragraphs,
yeah,
they're quite short,
yeah.
and these are like kind of like written from a personal perspective. This isn't like academic writing.
They originally came from students. Students wrote them, and we corrected them and edited them and tried to make a balance. The reason I did this, I guess this comes to one of your questions, but when I was teaching English for the first time to Japanese students, I kept seeing the same two problems, and I couldn't. None of the books I used were solving them. But the first one was the students simply had no idea about English writing rules. They just didn't know them. They didn't know what a comma was for. They didn't know how capital letters were used. They had no idea of different types of sentences. And some books would I think there was one called, is it called First Steps in Academic Writing? I think that's right, First Steps in Academic Writing. And it was an
Okay.
excellent book. It was fantastic, but it was all in English. And I was thinking, well, the students can't read this. And I need a Japanese version. So
Yeah,
that
so I noticed in your books you have like English explanations and then you have English model paragraphs, but you also have, with that you have a Japanese explanation.
absolutely. If I'm learning about five different languages at the moment as a hobby, and I've never, I would ne if I was learning a foreign language, I would never dream of using a book that was written in the foreign language. I want a book that's written in English that explains to me how to use the foreign language. And I
Right.
think it's crazy that we have these monolingual books that if they could read that, they wouldn't need it. Is
Right, right. So the instructions are much more at a higher level than the task that the students are asked to complete.
Yeah, and the partly it was the fact that they didn't know how to write English sentences, but the other one thing I noticed early on that I thought was really interesting was that Japanese people don't know that English is written on the line. And what I mean by that is that when you write in Japanese, when you write tate, like vertically, you
Right,
write in between the lines, right? You don't touch
right.
the line. So they transfer that to horizontal writing. So when they write, they don't actually put the letters on the line. They write in between the two lines. And almost, I've never known anybody to tell them this is wrong. And that's not how you write in English. You write with the letter on the line. This is what we learn in
Yeah,
elementary school.
it's something that we wouldn't think about as a native writer or native speaker of English. And also, I noticed there's a lot of students have trouble with punctuation
Yeah,
and
because they've never been taught it. They've never been taught it. They do have classes in high school that are called writing, but it's not, or it's basically translating. It means here's a Japanese sentence, translate it into English. So they have no concept of paragraph writing, and no concept really of the sentence rules. Even now, the number of students who think that he and she should be capitalized because I is capitalized is quite alarming. So that was my first goal too. That was the first problem I saw. They don't know the rules. So we need a Japanese explanation of that so that we can get past that and move on.
and did you find that there were like a set of common rules that students would have trouble with, or
Yes,
like basic
yes. So I
basic
know, yeah,
mistakes?
I collated them, and I thought, and it was based on, it was kind of like the common errors, but common writing errors. So
Okay,
like,
so, and you have that at the beginning of the book, is that
yes,
right,
so
still?
that's at the beginning of the book. So hang on, I'll show you on my screen. So it's called the writing manual. So it's like this, where we will have so capital letters. So on the left-hand page, we will have here are the rules about capital letters, and on the right-hand page, we have exercises. So please practice these.
Right. So it's basically they try to find the mistake and correct it.
Yes, and that's this. The idea is to do this at the beginning of the course, right at the beginning, so that we can say, I don't have to keep coming back to this again and again and again. And I made when I did the original book, and it's still the same. I made a key. So capital letters is one. What is a sentence is two. Simple sentences is three. And what this means is that when I'm marking them, as long as I know what's in the manual, or I don't need to change anything. I can just say, you need to read number 3 and number 7. Go away and read it and come back. So I'm a little bit lazy, I guess, and I just got tired of, if you've got a class of 25 students and you're correcting the same thing
Right.
17 times. It's like, well, no,
Right.
you've got it. It's in the book. Go away and read it. And it's in Japanese, so you don't need me. If you read it, you will be able to correct this.
Right. And I feel a bit of sympathy as a teacher when you get to that 17th student, you're extremely frustrated
Yeah.
and a bit prejudiced
Of course, yeah, yeah.
in a bad way.
And you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time as well. And I think what we do a lot in writing is that we actually set students up to fail, knowing that they can't do it. We ask them to do it, and then they turn out rubbish, and then we have to rewrite it. And you're just wasting their time and you're wasting our time as well.
Could you go back to the first one? I just want to see some of those examples. Maybe you can explain how students miss no, or use capital letters or the lack thereof.
Okay, so yeah, very, very common examples. These were all taken from student work. So I'm looking at student work and saying, what are the mistakes that they make? And then just
Right.
made a list of them, really. Names, something like Tokyo Station, they would never capitalize S. Or they would write, I went to the station and capitalize that. So this explains if it's the name, it's capitalized. If it's not, it's not. Of course, this is really difficult because native speakers and style guides don't agree on this. If you look at Chicago and APA, it'll be slightly different in
Right.
the.
So did you choose one to follow?
Yes. So very much I said, right, well, look, this is, and this is another problem where you've got a number of teachers teaching the same course and they don't agree. So one of them's saying like, well, that should be capital, and the other one's saying, no, it shouldn't. And that's a mess, especially if you're trying to coordinate a course. So by having this book, we can say, that's our style guide, that's our rule, those are the rules we're following. Please follow these rules. And it makes
And
it
which
easy
style guide did you choose to adopt?
it's mostly APA. But it makes it easier for the teachers. This, if you look at number 8 there, I don't know why, but students always write the names of groups and bands in block capitals. I have no idea why. And but they do it constantly. So north and south, they never know whether that should be capitalized or not. And to be fair, a lot of native speakers don't either. But so this is a simplified style guide for them, and it helps. It puts everybody on the same page. The teachers, the students, everybody's on the same page. This is correct. This is not correct. I explain to teachers that you may debate this, you may not like some of these rules, but these are the ones we're going with.
Right. And I see you have the explanations in Japanese. Do you also have a page with the explanations in English?
Yes, we do. They're at the this what I'm showing you now isn't the actual book. What I'm showing you now is the textbook that we use with GIF University students, which is where I am. And we decided to just go completely into Japanese for this. The actual book, Read to Write 3, will be the explanation you're looking at on the left will be in English, and then the Japanese version will be at the back.
I see.
So teachers can choose if you want them, focus them on the English, because some teachers will say, I'd like you to read this in English, it's good practice. And that's fine. That's a valid justification, I think. But you also need to say, well, look, if you need to read it again at home, then go in the back. It's in Japanese. And what we'll have is on each page, we'll have the Japanese version on page, so that they will know which page to go to.
Right. There's
But
a quick question I'm
Mm.
sorry, David. There's a quick question in the chat. Will
Um,
Read to Write 3 be a 3-level series?
no, no, no. It's third edition. So it's not it's the same level. It's the basic beginner level.
And the beginner level would be like a Sepher A2 or
I'm not sure. Yes, I would think A2.
and can we go
So,
down to I'm very interested in this uh the writing manual. Is that what you call
yeah,
it?
okay. So what is a sentence? So the my example there, this I mean I've seen this a million times. We visited many cities, for example, Paris and Rome. So they
Right.
use for example incorrectly. They think you can just write for example and then write the examples and then that's a sentence and it's
And
not.
why is that? Why do so many Japanese students write in
Because you
that?
can do it in Japanese. In Japanese it works. That's so often because tatoeru in Japanese is a verb, right?
Right.
So tatoeba is a verb, but in English, for example, isn't a verb.
Yeah, so I think it's fantastic that you've actually targeted the mistakes that your students will likely make, and then you
Yeah.
have this example with an
Again,
explanation, and then exercises to
I've been doing it
practice
so
fixing that.
long. Been doing it so long that I've seen these so many times from so many different students. It's not a mystery. You know, any teacher will look at this and go, "Okay, yeah, mine got that right." Because as well, they will often split a sentence. They will say, "I decided to go home, comma, because I was tired." And
Right.
again, you can do that in Japanese, but you can't do it in English.
Yeah, I find a lot of students misuse because and so, or they
Yeah,
mix them up.
hang on. There you go.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, great.
I have a special page for it. Yeah. It's not rocket science. It's we know what they do. Anybody who's been teaching here more than a couple of years knows what mistakes they make. So let's get rid of all this at the beginning so that we can get on with the writing. I don't want to waste time. It's a writing class. I want them to write. So I don't want to waste time going through all these rules because that would take up the whole 15 weeks. So what we
So
do,
this writing manual, there are 10 steps or
yes,
10
I think it's
items on that.
11, 10 or 11, yeah.
How long does that take to go through in
Generally
a
2 weeks. So we will say, and the first 2 weeks will be this. So you will say, do these exercises of homework, come back and we'll check them in the class. Now, I know that they are not going to remember everything and they're not going to be perfect, but it might head some mistakes off at the pass. And the other thing is that it gives me the option to then go back and say, when you make that mistake, I'll say, no, go and read number 3 again, go and read number 6 again. You're still making this mistake, go and read this. But it means that I don't have to teach it again. All I need to do is point them back to the thing that they should have read. And if they haven't read it, they'll make the mistake. But at least I know that they should have read it. And if they haven't,
right. And
they go back and read it again. Yeah.
since you've laid this out in such an orderly and efficient manner, do you find you get less of these mistakes now than before you were using these
Oh
materials?
yeah, definitely, yeah. We still get them. I mean, it's not magic. There's plenty of students don't actually read it. They don't do their homework properly. They copy it off their friends. But yes, fewer mistakes than before, definitely.
Right. Can we go back up to number 2 or 3? I just want to kind of go
Sure.
through these because these are very, very useful. I think this might be one of the most useful things in the book.
We
The
do.
basics.
I do. I think we still do. I think I actually published this as a booklet, and it's like 700 or 800 yen. And the idea is, whatever class you're teaching, if you add this, then you've got all this explained in Japanese, and you don't have to bother. You don't have to spend so much time doing all this. Let them read it because they can understand. If they read it in Japanese, they can understand in 30 seconds what would take 10 minutes of class time to get across, and you still wouldn't know whether they'd really got it.
And how do you check? I mean, they've got exercises on one side of the
Yes.
page,
Yeah.
and they try to correct them or fix the sentences. How do you check the answers just as a
So we come
class,
back.
or do you
We
have
come back. So we
peer
do.
checking, peer review?
Yes. So we do the first week. The homework is to go away and do 1 to 5, and then we come back in the next week and we go through them, and then they do peer checking, and then I put the answers up on a PowerPoint, and they can go and write the answers. And even if they haven't really read it, hopefully they can see what's wrong, and then the same for the second week. So
Right.
it's
And
it's kind of, it's kind of a weird approach, but I think it's efficient.
well, I see like two points that I find very interesting about this is one, these are common errors in writing,
Yeah, yeah.
and that all the students will be making or would have the potential to make. However, since it's presented to them, they don't have that kind of embarrassment that I made this mistake
That's
because
true.
it's
Yeah,
presented in a book. And
yeah.
then the second part that I find very interesting is that they have these exercises where they try to correct the mistakes and they
Mm.
also check with their peers to see if
Yeah.
they've
So
got
yeah, there's no loss of face there.
right.
They can check whether they've got it. But I mean, the people who've read them properly will be able to do it. So, but it's good because you have a chance in the classroom. If people are getting stuff wrong, they can ask you why. Why is this wrong? Why did I get this wrong? And then you can explain to them. So, instead of explaining everything to everybody, you can cut it down and explain only the things that you need to explain to the people who need it explained.
Right, right. And also the students themselves can teach each
Yes, yeah,
other.
definitely. They do. They do a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's a great setup and very simple and quite efficient if you can do all this in 2 weeks or two lessons, imagine, right?
Yes, yeah, that's the idea. But with the option to keep coming back to it because it's always there. So when I see a student who's making a mistake with, for example, I just say, go back and read number two. And I just write in red two with a square box around it. And that means you need to go back and read number two.
Right, and
And
that saves teachers a lot of time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's why it needs to be in English as well, so the teachers can follow, what the explanations are.
And I noticed it's kind of like a workbook, so students actually have to write with pen or pencil
Yes,
into the
yeah,
book.
yeah, yeah.
And you
My,
find that much more beneficial for teaching and
I
rather
do.
than typing on their phone or on a
I
computer.
do. I'm in the Faculty of Education, and I've been going around watching my students doing teaching practice. And I do that every year. It's not new, but the thing that's really blown me away this year is the just the horrendous overuse of iPads. Every student is glued to the screen for 60 or 70% of the lesson, and most of what they're doing is completely unnecessary. You don't need an iPad. I saw one where the students were asking each other, "Do you like X? Yes, I do. No, I don't." And they were actually, the Japanese, they write the five,
Right,
like the kanji to it's
right,
not
as
five,
a
is it? Or,
tally.
yeah, yeah, the one that makes it counts to five. And they were doing that on an iPad. And I was going, why do you need an iPad to do that? And as a parent, you spend most of your time trying to get your kids away from screens. And then they go to school and the school go, here's a screen, knock yourselves out. And I think it's a big mistake. And I think it's going to come back to bite us. And I think in a few years, people will realize you need the pen, you need the paper, you need that tactile element. If you don't have
Sure.
that, I think it's a big mistake. I'm not
Can we
saying
scroll?
it
Can we
shouldn't be
scroll
any
down a
iPads.
little
Yeah.
bit? Because and I'd like to move on. So we've got simple sentences.
Yeah. So this is how do you write a simple sentence? So it can be SSV, SVV. I must admit, I not copied, but I was inspired a lot by the book First Steps in Academic Writing, which
Okay.
explains all this. And I have to admit, before I taught that book, I didn't know this. I'd never been taught this. I think, from what I understand, Americans are, but Brits are not. And I never really learned this in school, and it was quite an eye opener for me.
Oh, I
Uh,
wonder if the Japanese students are taught because I often
no,
see the SVO.
no, they're definitely not taught. So, so for example, beginning sentences with a conjunction and, a button, so, and or. This native speakers get very flustered about this, and they say, "Oh, but proficient writers do it, and we can't say it's wrong." Yes, proficient writers do it, but Japanese will do it way, 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 way too much. It's much better to tell them never do it, and then when they get better, then you can bring it back in. But for beginners, we say just don't do that. It's
Right, right.
Michael is agreeing, I think. Because of course in Japan, in Japanese, you can start a sentence with a conjunction, and they do
Right.
frequently.
Yeah,
And
and that stems from the same. I guess the main issue is the direct translation.
yeah, I used to do a presentation about this where I said if you look at Picasso's paintings, they're awful, right? It's just a mess. Uh, but if you look at Picasso's early paintings, it's quite clear that he was a genius. And
He
he
was telling
went
me he had definite skills.
incredible skill. And then he went from that to the cubism thing. So the cubism thing made sense because we knew that this is a person who knows how to do it and is choosing not to. And it's the same with using and but to start sentences. When we do that, we do it for a reason. But the students are not doing it for a reason. They're just doing it because they don't know any better. So we
Right.
teach them that the general rule is that we don't do that. And if we're doing it for a reason. But that's another level. That's not what they should be learning in writing 101, as it were.
So after they go through these 10 steps, what happens next in the book?
Okay, so what will happen well, this is new. This has changed. So what happens now is this is the GIF University version. We go one more thing was we do. We give them a checklist of things that are wrong in things that are common mistakes, and then we put them all together and we say, here's one that contains 10 mistakes, try and find them all. So they get
Okay.
into that kind of that frame of mind. So the next thing we do is we teach them the idea of read to write. Now, this I said at the beginning that there were two things that I noticed. The first one was that they don't know the rules of writing. And the second one was that they're not writing in English. They're writing in Japanese using English words. So what they're constructing Japanese sentences and replacing the words with English words. And it just doesn't work. And you end
Right.
up, because you need the skill of a translator to do that, you can't just replace one word with another. And I thought, well, this is kind of natural, right? Because they've never seen the kind of language that we're asking them to produce. And I think
Right.
I'm asking you to write an introduction about of yourself. They've never read one. If they have, they've read one that was very, basic in junior high school. And when my first book with ALK, in fact, all of my books in ALK were written in Japanese, so I write in Japanese. And the way I learned to write in Japanese was by reading Japanese. So I would look at the Japanese and think, okay, I see what they've done there. I see how that pattern is working. I can use that. I can adapt that and make my own sentence. And when I do that, it's proper Japanese because it's based on Japanese. So that's what I wanted them to do in this book. I was like, well, let's give them some models of the writing. Let's let
Right.
them take that language, adapt it to what they want to say, and then we're all going to save ourselves an awful lot of trouble because if I just say write a self-introduction, go for it, be creative, you're gonna end up completely rewriting it. And if you're
Right.
rewriting it, then what's the point in getting them to write it in the first place?
Right. And you're going to
So,
get a whole variety
oh, it's going to be all over the
of
place. And I've been
really
there. I've
strange
done that. Yeah.
strange
And
writings.
some teachers will say, look, all of this stuff about rules and sentences and correct grammar doesn't matter. Don't worry about that at all. The only thing that matters is the creative process. Now, I think that's utter nonsense, but I mean, that's a valid opinion, I
Well,
suppose.
I think what you have here, you've got students following a model,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of it's actually works into like maybe an Asian sort of state of mind where
Yeah,
they
an Asian
follow
approach
the
to yeah.
predecessor, the
Mm.
teacher, or they follow the senpai and kohai.
Yeah,
They see a
absolutely.
model and
Yeah.
they kind of mimic that, and then they
Yeah.
adapt it or change it to their own output.
And the other thing is that because all of us, we've seen these writings so many times, we know what they want to say. And so we can give them the language that they need to say what we know they're going to want to say. But it's different for each student, right? So we give them 7 models and we say, read them all. And what I'm trying to get them to do is to look below the sentence, look at the structure. So the example I've got there is Seto is 30 minutes east of Nagoya by train. So the pattern there is the place you want to explain is the time, direction of the other place that the person does know by Kotsishidan, so whatever, and you can apply that. You can make an infinite number of sentences using that. You can describe, wherever it is you come from. You can describe using this because you can say by train, by bus, by car. It can be north, it can be south, it can be west, it can be east, and all you have to do is choose a place that people are likely to know and explain it from that point. So what I don't want them to read a sentence like Seto is 30 minutes east of Nagoya by train and simply understand that sentence. What I want them to do is notice how that sentence is constructed and think to themselves, oh, I can use that. Okay, I can apply that. So that's what the book is about, really.
Right. And most of the subject matter is about themselves, where they
Yes,
live, their
absolutely.
hobbies.
Because when I learned teaching, where when I was first became a teacher, the golden rule of teaching for me was that, or as I was taught, is that you teach the unknown using the known. You teach the unfamiliar using the familiar. So we're
Right.
not going to have them writing about something that they don't really know anything about, using language that they don't know. It doesn't make sense. Take away the difficult. The language is difficult enough by itself. I'm kind of you'll get me on a rant. I don't want to upset the CLIL people.
That was in my that word was just
Yeah,
popping
well,
into my head.
there does seem to be this idea that English is simply an empty vessel that doesn't contain anything, and therefore we need to put content into it. Well, if you don't speak the language is the content. If you don't speak it, if you already speak it, then fair enough, it's just a vessel for transmitting knowledge. But if you don't speak it, the language is the content.
Right,
And
right. And I was talking to one group at a certain university where they're changing the curriculum. It's kind of a low-level university, and I know the students very well because I've taught there for many years. And they're implementing a CLIL structure, and I'm thinking the students
so,
they just need basic conversation,
yeah,
basic writing. They
yep,
don't need to learn about, communicating engineering
yeah.
or, psychological terms that are specific to their field. They need like basic
Yeah,
communication
I
skills.
mean, they will need that at some point, but the
Yeah.
question is, where are they now? And if you've got if you give me students who say, well, they can already write this kind of stuff, then I would say, well, they don't need this book then. This book is not an appropriate book for them. But I've never met any university students who haven't, even the ones who studied abroad, who can actually do this. But we do occasionally have students who will say, this is too easy for me. And we'll say, well, that's fine. Sit down, write me a passage. And then they will write the passage, and you'll say, well, no, that's a pile of rubbish. You clearly do need this book.
Okay.
If
So you've got these model sentences. They kind of
Yeah,
follow those. They find the grammar structures and they
yeah,
write it, personalize it to their
yeah.
own situations. What's the next step after that? Do they go to
Okay, so what they
paragraphs?
do with each model, with each model, they will identify phrases that they could use, and the key here is that not that you're going to use, but that you could use. Change these sentences. If they don't apply to you at all, ignore them. But if they could be used about you, then make your own sentences, and we do that in the bottom here, my sentences. So we get the idea is you go through the 7 models and you end up with a list of sentences that you can use. So here, for example, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we get to 7. Um, this is the
Okay, and
key.
these are all 7 models on one topic.
Yes, 7 models on one topic. And the idea is that once you've got this collection of sentences, then you work to put those together to make a comprehensible paragraph, a sensible, logical paragraph. You don't have to use them all. You might add your own. Maybe there's something you want to say that wasn't in the models. That's fine. Have a go at it. But what we've done is we've got enough in there that it's going to make it much, much, much easier for the teacher to mark. If there's a couple of places where they've had a go at saying something different, then we can correct that for them. But if every single sentence is wrong, as it will be if they write completely freely, almost every sentence will be wrong. And you end up with this. I mean, if you've got a class of 6 or 7, then maybe you could do that. But if you've got a class of 25 or 30, you're going to kill yourself if you do this. And you're not helping them, you're just setting them up to fail.
Right, and the teacher is limited with their time and
Yeah, of course, yeah.
effort.
Especially
So,
part-timers, yeah.
do you have them peer check before they submit it to the teacher, or how does that
Yes, yeah.
process
So
work?
what we generally do is that they will write the topic in class. They will go through this, and they do this in class. It becomes kind of like a workshop, and then they will peer check. Yeah, they will check each other's using the checklist, and then they will go home and then they will submit it. These days we do it online. They submit online on Teams, Microsoft Teams, and then the teacher can look at it, give feedback. But it can just as easily be done on paper. They bring it in and they hand it in to you. That works too.
Okay, and so this is a self-introduction. What are some of the other topics that you have in this book?
If I go back to the beginning, you can see the contents. So there we go. So week 1, there's the weekly schedule. So writing conventions 1, Writing Conventions 2. So that's Manual Part 1, Manual Part 2. Self-introductions, hometown, school life. Um, what we did with family and friends is a few teachers were kind of uncomfortable asking students to write about their family
Yep.
because they were saying, maybe they don't want to talk about their family. And I said, well, yeah, maybe, but, in terms of an English class, they still need the language to talk about a family, whether they want to or not. So what we ended up doing was giving them a choice. So you can either write about family or write about friends, and the students have that choice. And
Right.
then what we do, we have a midterm test. So what we'll say is you've written and submitted 4 paragraphs, a total of 4 paragraphs. In the midterm test, I'm going to ask you to produce one of them or two of them, but you don't know which two. So what they'll do is they'll go away and they'll memorize these perfect paragraphs that they've written because you've already checked them. So we give them a grade when they hand it in, and then we correct it and give it back so that they can make it perfect. And
Right.
then that will be tested in the midterm. So in the midterm, I will say, right, you're going to do hometowns and school life, go. And then in that class, they've got to produce those 2 paragraphs. So they end up memorizing what they've written. Is
So
the
one paragraph is about 100 words.
100 words is the aim, yeah.
And how much time do you give them to write those two paragraphs as in the test?
About 30 to 40 minutes, but they don't need it because they've mostly memorized it. So most of them do it in about 10 minutes. But you can have them do it much more. You can give them enough time that that anybody would be able to do it. So
And
that's not an issue.
how do you mark these tests in terms of like
Well,
a grade?
This is another thing that will be different in Read to Write 3. And actually, I'd welcome the opinions of people who've used the book. What we do is we actually have in the book, this is the Japanese version, but we actually have a rubric saying this is
Could
an
you
S.
put up the English version if you have it?
No, I don't have it. Sorry, it's in a different file.
Okay.
But the English the teachers have an English version of this, and the students have a Japanese version. And the students, so it's very, very clear to the students what is an S, what's an A, what's a B, what's a C. And in my job, I've very often been the coordinator, where I'm trying to get a lot of teachers to do the same thing. And having this, I've found helps an awful lot because otherwise you get a lot of discrepancy between teachers looking for different things.
Right.
So having this enables us to say, and when we did this, we trialed it. So what we would do was we would take in, we would get a pile of student writing and we would sit around a table and there'd be 6 of us and we'd say, right, what does everybody think? And everybody had to be within 1 grade, the same as Cambridge exams.
Sure.
If you say C and I say B, it's not the end of the world. But if we've got something where somebody's saying fail and somebody else is saying a B, then we need to look into that. We need to figure out what's wrong there. So we
Right.
developed the rubric over quite a long time, going through that process. And now it's basically you read it, and once you've learned it and once you've practiced it a little bit, it will take you a minute to mark a piece of writing. You'll just read through it and you'll see instantly. Um,
Okay. And is this book set up for a semester in Japan or is it an
yes,
entire
and
year?
so it's a semester. So if you go back to this was the other thing about making my own books. I wanted books that fit my schedule. So that's exactly how it works. So we got week 1, week 8 midterm, week 15 review and final test. So it's set up for a 15-week course.
What do you do when like because a lot of students don't purchase their books until the second or third week?
Yeah, we tend to we're quite strict about that. But the other thing we do is that the teachers have this is all on PowerPoint. So the teachers will actually display it on the screen during the class. And if the students don't have the book, they can read it off the screen. And then they will have to write the answers on a piece of paper and transfer them to their book when it comes. But the information that they need is there on the screen.
Okay. And you said you use some Google Classrooms or some kind of LMS
Teams, we use
to
Microsoft Teams, yeah.
Teams
But that's only for submission
of
of
the
the final paragraph. So the students will submit their paragraph to Teams. We will give it a grade and we will send it back with feedback. And yeah, that's about the one thing
it
I've
looks like
skipped.
it looks like a fantastic book. It looks like it's very easy to use. It's very teacher friendly and very student it kind of understands the needs of the student as well as the needs of the teacher.
Well, I hope so. And Michael's been using it for a few years, so he may have thoughts. But let me. There's one thing I skipped, which is in the new book. Which this is the big difference with the third edition. The third edition has these common English errors. So these are from my red book, and what we do here, I can't remember. It's a different file, but what we do is at the beginning we actually have a week where they go through and they read all of the errors because each one is really short. It's about this long. They read them and then they do an exercise. They correct it, correct it, correct it. And the idea is again to introduce them all at the beginning, and then when they actually go through them, every paragraph now comes with a mistake.
Okay,
So
so like if they're
here you
talking
go.
about their family, the common mistake is I have four families.
Yes, that's one of them. But here you go. Can you see that?
A 1 point advice:
Yes.
I do not have any brothers or sisters.
Brother, yeah, no, read it carefully.
I do not have any brother and sister. Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's the mistake they made.
I missed the mistake.
Yeah, okay, because we correct it, right? Number
Right,
eight.
yeah.
So each one of these now has the because a lot of people used to say to me, I would love to have the red book too, but I can't make the students buy two books.
Right,
And the red book is the Common English Errors.
right.
And I thought, well, that's fair enough, but I can't give all the information, but I can give a very, very quick explanation of it. So this book contains a vast, I think it's about 100 and something common errors that are all from the red book. And
Nice.
these are there's at the end. This is the a list of all the errors at the end of the book, so that
Okay.
teachers can find them very quickly. So
Okay,
they
and
get
this edition will be available for the spring semester.
yes for the spring semester. Yeah,
Okay, and your distributor is English Books, is that right? Or do you have other
Englishbooks.jp.
multiple distributors?
Englishbooks.jp. That's it.
Okay. Let's switch gears a little bit. I would like to ask about the creative process that you go through since you've written so many books. It
There we
seems
go.
like a lot of your materials come from the classroom and problems that students have and problems that teachers have, and
Yeah,
then you just compile them and say this could become a book. Is
yeah.
that accurate?
That's exactly accurate. When I did my first book, the one for ALK, what happened was I remember that the first mistake was almost Japanese people like rice, and I thought I've explained this so many times. I don't want to explain it again. It's the same thing again and again. And I was learning Japanese at the time, and I thought, well, this would be a nice idea. I could improve my own Japanese by trying to write this explanation in Japanese, and then I
Hmm.
can write it on a piece of paper. And anytime a student makes a mistake, just give them the paper. And so I did that. I think there was about 10 mistakes. And then it just every class I was ending up writing. We didn't have phones back in those days. I was writing on my hand, and I was kind of, by the end of the class, I was up here, up my t-shirt, that one, that one, that one. And then I would go home and write the explanation, get a Japanese friend to check it, and then bring it in and give it to the students and say, does that make sense? Can you understand that? And if they didn't, I would rewrite it. And if they did, then that was great. So, yeah, it all comes from the class. I did actually have, there were a couple of years where I was publishing full time. I left my job at Nanzan University, and I was making enough money publishing. I was happy with that, but it didn't work because I didn't have any ideas. I didn't have anything new. I
Oh,
had,
because you're out of the classroom.
yeah, I was out of the classroom, and I didn't expect that. I thought that I would be okay, but I wasn't. You
Okay,
have to,
so actually you're in the classroom in order to write books.
yes. Well, both, yeah. But I'm writing books because I'm in the classroom, so.
Right, so you need both.
The best thing anybody can say, and people do say sometimes about books is, that was easy, that helped me, that made your book made my life easier. That would be, that's what I'm aiming for, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of teachers are they're sometimes very frustrated with the books that they have because they don't kind of match the needs of the students,
Right.
or they're too cumbersome, or they expect too much from the teacher. A
Well,
lot of teachers are busy and they don't have time to
it's
invest so
in,
much.
it's incredibly different. I mean, I don't think there can be any career like where you'll get so much or so little agreement between professionals as ours. I mean, one person will say that a book is brilliant and the other person will say it's useless. And, that's why we have so many books. That's fine. You have to have a book that you believe in, because if you don't believe in it, it's not going to work.
I imagine you do get some criticism about your book or like this isn't
Yeah, yeah.
working or this, and does that help you or do you?
Not really. It depends on the criticism I get most about that book in particular is it's too simple. It's insulting to the students. It's not university level. Students at the university level shouldn't be doing this. And my response to that is, yeah, you're wrong. If you want to think that, that's fine. But
Well, you do have a like a junior level, don't you, for like
yeah,
low
that's for kids. That's for
that's for
kids.
kids.
Because really, I mean, in a way, people are right. They shouldn't be doing this in university. They should be doing this in school. But the problem is that they're not. And the fact that they should have been, but they didn't, we can't just skip over that. They, as you were saying, capital letters, punctuation, they don't know this, and they don't know it because nobody's ever taught them.
I did notice you do have some academic writing books or
Yeah,
or another author writing for your
Read to
company?
Write became a series. So we did Read to Write email, and then Read to Write compositions, which was multi-paragraph, and that has a different writing manual. That's more for the kind of university level. But in terms of what you were saying about feedback, it's very useful. I'm not a very good writer, I don't think by any stretch of the imagination, but I edit and I go back and I do it again, 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 again. Sometimes I read the thing I wrote originally and I thought, I have no idea what I was thinking there. I don't know why I ever wrote that, but I get the feedback from people and say, we don't understand that. That doesn't make sense.
Do you work with an editor?
Yeah, yeah. My editor is a woman called Dorothy Zemak.
Sure,
She's
yeah.
a very well-known writer. She writes with Macmillan and many other publishers. I was really lucky when I that's a funny story. When I first started publishing, I went to a conference in Malaysia, and I was a featured speaker at that conference, and so was Dorothy. And I'd never met her. I didn't know who she was, didn't know anything about her, but we really hit it off, and we became best buddies. And because we were there for a week. And we ended up having dinner every night. And I told her what I was doing. And I said, yeah, I really need an editor. And she said, well, look no further. And that was it. And it was brilliant. So I got a top class editor.
Yeah,
She's
fantastic.
wonderful because she will say, and I will say to her, yeah, but sometimes I'm not sure. And I'll say, yeah, but some people say this. And she'll say, yeah, they do. And they're wrong. And she's that's what you need. You need an editor who will say, this is right, this is wrong. Um,
And
you
is she right?
yeah, she's always right. I've argued with her a couple of times. I've never been right. She's been doing
Well,
it a long time.
yeah, what are I mean, someone who has a outside perspective is useful, and someone who gives it to you straight is quite useful. Is there any other qualities that make her a great editor, or some like
Yeah,
what would be a good quality for an editor?
I think that, well, if you think about the actual meaning of the word to edit, I'm a little bit verbose. I write too much. I over-explain, and she will pare it down. She'll chop it down to, you don't need that second sentence. The first one covers it. Or if you change it like this, so she'll make it shorter. And she will get rid of she gets rid of my bad habits, which I guess is what an editor is for. And let me say, this is the material writer's SIG, yeah? You may think, if you are a budding materials writer, you may think I don't need an editor. Let me tell you, you could not possibly be more wrong. It doesn't matter who you are, the greatest writers in history, everybody has an editor. You need an editor, and you need to find, it doesn't have to be, a world-renowned expert, but you need that outside view. Somebody will say how about like this, or that this should be like this. And one of the things I found most difficult in writing is consistency, following style rules. And very often we have to make them up because we're doing things like we're mixing Japanese and English and we're not sure, should that be italicized or should it, what's the best way to do this?
Right, and you
And
need consistency.
yeah,
Yeah.
Dorothy is great at going, do it like this. And because I'll spend 3 nights of losing sleep thinking I could do it like this or I could do it like this. And Dorothy will say, no, just do it like this. And that's it. And that takes a lot of the pressure off. So
Okay, and do you work with any other professionals like layout or
Um,
audio or artists or graphic designers, anything like that?
I did because all my ALC books were done by professional designers and layout people, and one of them I asked, I think the original version of this book was done by a professional that I met through ALC. But then I got married and my wife is she started learning InDesign and she was just so quick and she was able to do stuff that was much better than professional layout people can do. And the the advantage, well, there are two big disadvantages with a layout person. One is that they're incredibly expensive. If you look at the cost of getting, there are two different things. There is layout, and there's what's called, I think it was called DTP, Nagashikomi in Japanese, where somebody will make the design of the book, and then somebody else had to actually put all the text into that design. And these
Hmm.
are two different people, two different jobs, and you have to pay them separately, and they're really, really expensive. And it's much, much better if it's the same person doing both because
Right.
they can adjust the design as they go. And the other thing is that ability to be able to sit down and talk with them. Because if it's a professional, you will send them an email and they will be busy and they will get back to you. And it's just really difficult to do.
Right. And if you're living in the same house with the
Yeah,
designer,
it helps an awful lot. If you can find somebody around you, I mean, if you're a materials writer and you want to get into this, you need to learn Adobe InDesign, which again, back in the day, that was a horrendous task. Now it's all on YouTube. You just go on, InDesign Basics. It's so easy to use now. I came in at a point where it was already fairly easy to use. Before that, apparently it used to be horrific. Yeah, I would very much recommend learning how to do that yourself and
and
finding somebody who is good at design. Find somebody you know, or I'm guessing within the Material Writers SIG, you have people who do this.
yeah, people have, different areas that they're interested in doing, and some people are quite good at
Yeah,
design work.
and also you'll be able to find people. Somebody will know someone.
Sure.
If I don't, I can't do it, but I know somebody who will do it. So you need an editor and you need a designer, absolutely. Or even though you think you don't, you really do. I've got a friend who edits his own stuff, and he says, "Oh, I'm really good at editing." And there's three mistakes on every page, and it's like, well, clearly not. It's, it's,
Right.
but I don't know why, but you're completely unable to spot mistakes in your own work. I don't know
Right.
why.
I mean, you look at the same page
Very
10 times
difficult.
and you
Yeah.
won't see any mistakes, but there'll be 10 mistakes on there that your mind seems to just correct, or
As
you're
you just did when you read the do you have
right,
any
right, right. Yeah, because I didn't see the mistake,
Yep,
but it was there because I didn't
your
read
brain fills it
each
in.
individual word.
Yep.
Yeah.
Particularly if what I've found, and this is kind of an interesting point that I would recommend to anybody who's looking for an because proofreading is a different thing from editing again, right? You don't
Right.
Your editor's not a proofreader. They're going to go through and they're going to pick out mistakes, but you need a proofreader, someone who's going to go and look for mistakes. And the best people I've found at that are the Japanese because their brain doesn't fill it in. They quite literally read it word by word. I used to have a seminar student who was she became a teacher. She wasn't she was autistic. She was on the spectrum definitely, and she was an absolute demon at proofreading. She could find stuff that five native speakers would miss it and she would pick it out.
That's interesting perspective,
Yeah,
because
I never expected that, but you get a job. The other thing I've found that's really good is you give it to your students and you say anyone who finds a mistake gets 500 yen per mistake.
oh yeah,
It's
great.
cheaper than getting a proofreader.
Right.
You give it to the students and let them go through it, and they will, they're 500 yen for a student's a lot of money. They'll be
Yeah.
like, "Come on, let's get into this." Yeah,
I don't bribe my students with money, but I do give them points for their grade for any mistakes that they find.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
And the other thing is like the layout of the book, like the facing pages
yeah,
are very important for a textbook. So if you're
yeah,
working with a designer, you
yeah.
have to kind of have a rough idea of how it's going to look out in a printed text.
You do, and that's why it's a lot better to have a designer who's also a teacher, because
Right.
if the designer is also a teacher, then they know all this. You don't need to explain it all. For example, the people who were designing my ALC books were not. teachers, and they had no idea. They would do what I told them to do, but they wouldn't have any ideas themselves. Whereas when my wife was doing it, she was saying, "Let's do it like this," and how about if you move this to here? And
Right.
uh,
Sometimes I'll see a textbook with like a fill in the blank space that's
yeah,
really
too
small.
short. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's the
like the
big
word
one.
they're
That's a
not
good one.
obviously if you're going to be writing 3 or 4 words,
Yeah,
it's not going to fit in the space.
or the
But
gap between the
the
lines is too small.
right.
That's another
That's
one.
always
Yeah.
very frustrating. And I have to apologize to the students, like write really small. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I would. Yeah, I don't want to talk only about my book. I'm happy to give advice to,
Yeah,
to
so
people
what
who are
would be
interested.
some advice to someone who's just, thinking they've got an idea for a book
Yeah.
and let's say they wanted to self-publish
Yeah.
or what would you advise them to do or whether it's worth doing?
I think the first thing you have to do is I would encourage you to try. The what you have to remember is that you're always going to love everything that you do because it fits exactly your style and the way that you want to teach. For it to be a book, it has to be useful for other people. So what I would do is I would get something like a trial unit, and I would get it designed properly, but so that it looks good. And I would find people to send it to and say, "Would you mind trying this in one of your classes?" And get people to give you the feedback, because that's when you'll find out whether it's a useful idea or not. What happened with me was that I didn't do this deliberately, but I did it accidentally because I was in charge of, I think it was about 8 or 9 part-time teachers, and all of them were teaching in other places. So what I did was I gave them the materials for the unit for the classes in our university, and they
Right.
all then took it and started using it in other places because they liked it. But I never expected them to do that or asked them to do that. It just that's the way it worked out. But the fact that other people wanted to use it made me realize, okay, well, there's something in this.
Yeah, there's something of use for
Yeah,
them.
I mean, you have to know, do other people, is this going to be useful for other people? Because without that, no matter how much of a brilliant idea you think it is, if other people are not going to use it, it's not going to be a book.
Yeah. A lot
Because
of
the
people ask about some practical things like where do I get an ISBN number or
Yeah,
how do I
okay.
find a printer? What would you say to people asking those sort of basic
Yes.
questions?
There are a lot of ways to do this. ISBN is something you have to register for. Now, you don't get an ISBN for a book. I used to think, I've got this book, therefore I want an ISBN. It doesn't work like that. What you do is you register as a publisher with the ISBN authority in Japan. And when you register as a publisher, they will give you pay and they will give you 20 ISBNs. And then you are free to use those on the books. If you're only doing one book, it doesn't really make sense. It would be much better to get someone who already does that to publish it for you. There's a chap called, I don't know if you've had him on, Paul Lewis. Does anybody know Paul Lewis? He does a thing called Perceptia Press.
Oh yeah, I know
Yeah.
that company. Yeah.
Okay, so people like Paul, he will do the design and the layout for you, and he will put an ISBN on for you. If it depends what you're aiming for. If your aim
So
is
if he puts the ISBN, does he own the copyright to that book or
No, 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 not at all. No, all that means is that when somebody looks it up, it will come back to him as the publisher, not as the writer. And that was another thing I never knew actually was about copyright. You don't, when you write something, you automatically own the copyright to it. You don't have to register it or do anything official. You writing it gives you copyright. So even if somebody else publishes it, they don't have the right. So Alc published all my books, but I own the copyright to all of the content, which surprised me. I thought that they would take it, but they don't.
okay,
Um,
so if you wanted to take that content and go with another publisher, you're free to
no,
do that?
because we have a contract that says
Right,
I'm not allowed to do that. Well,
right.
for a certain amount of time. I think it's probably expired by now.
Yeah, I
But
think maybe the default is a few years, and then if it's out of print, then
yes,
you
that's it. Yeah.
you
So
can
publishing by yourself is quite a big thing, and I wouldn't do it unless you are planning to do a series. If you're going to do 5 or 6 books, then it's worth doing it. If it's just this one book, I've got this one idea for this one book. Paul Lewis, contact Paul Perception Press. Say I've got this idea. What do you think? And if he likes it, he'll do it. and then you'll get a book in your hand, and that's your book. It's got your name.
So is that kind of like a vanity press, or is it, will they pay for the, I'm asking if they'll pay for the printing basically, which is a major expense.
Yes, so that's yeah, that's a good point actually. The vanity printing. The If you offer to pay for the printing, they'll publish anything because there's zero risk, right? Because they're just
Right. It's no risk for them.
no
A little
risk
bit of
at
time if
all.
they're designing the
Uh,
book and stuff.
but what normally happens is you would say, what people normally do with Paul is they'll say, listen, I teach 3 classes of 50 students each, so I will use at least 150 of these books for the next 5 years. And so then Paul will say, well, okay, well, it's worth my while to print them then.
Right.
And you would negotiate that with him, I think. The deal would be, I mean, if you were not paying for the printing, you would get lower royalties. So
Right.
it's all a negotiation about, what kind of royalties you're going to get. But as I say, if you need to be sure that somebody else is going to want to use this book and that they're going to sell. Because if not, there's not really much point in doing it. I suppose
Right.
another option these days is the ebook, which I believe you can self-publish on
Yeah,
Amazon.
I know some people they have got their books print on demand on Amazon,
Yeah.
but I wonder how that works with university bookstores because I don't think
You
they're
can't do that.
keen
So
on
that's
that.
another thing. University bookstores need a publishing company to order through. So if you can't just go to your university bookstore and say, "Hey, these are the books I want you to sell to the students." They can't do that. They need to order it from a publisher. So your two choices are you either find a publisher or you set yourself up as a publisher. I did the latter. I actually became a publishing entity.
Right. So you've got a, is that a limited liability company or is it
No, I
self?
didn't go limited liability company. I just went as an individual enterprise.
I see. Okay.
Was
But
using
you did need to, did you have to get a tax number for that? I know the
Yeah,
rules
yeah, yeah,
changed
yeah.
last
So I have to get
year.
again, you have to get an accountant, you have to do. See, one of the things you've got to think about is that the university bookstore is going to order the books, and then somebody's got to put them in boxes and send them. Now, what's going to happen is that in June, if this is the first semester, in June, they're going to send back the ones they didn't sell.
Right.
Now, where are they going to send them to? Who's going to take them in?
Right.
Somebody's going to take them in, check them, make sure, work out how many were sold. Then you've got to send out an official invoice. Then they will pay the official invoice. It's not easy.
Right. So that's why you go with a distributor. Is that right?
I do now, yeah. Originally, because the number was quite small and it was all people I knew. So what I did was, there's a strange rule in Japan that accountants are not allowed to have more than one office. An accountant can only have one office,
Okay.
one accountancy office. So if it under your name. So what most of them will do is they will set up subsidiary firms that are not accountants, they're bookkeepers.
Okay.
And so the accountant I was using had a subsidiary that was bookkeeping, and they ran my business for me. So
Okay.
he did the accounts and they ran the business and they took a cut. So I said, okay, you can take 20% cut from this.
And where were the books stored?
Yes, that's another problem. They stored them. They had a storeroom. But when you get beyond a certain point, yeah. So EBJ, I work with EnglishBooks.Japan.jp, and they have a huge warehouse, so they store them.
Okay. So you don't have to worry about all the business to business
No,
transactions.
I wouldn't want to do that. I would make slightly more money if I did that, but it's just not worth it.
Right.
Some people, you may, other people may say it is worth it. I'd rather have more money. So you can do that. But EBJ, they also have ISBNs. So you can. What they're not going to do is if you say, I've got this brilliant idea, I've got a book, I want you to print 1,000 of it, they're not going to do that because they have no way of knowing whether they'll ever sell them.
Right.
Um, so you've either got to say, well, we've sold this many so far, or, I'm running a course and I can guarantee that 10 teachers are going to use them. Or you say, I'll pay for the printing.
Right.
And then, that's a different issue.
Yeah, and I do notice a lot of the smaller publications that have several authors on there, and I imagine that, 4 or 5 authors will be listed on a book. I imagine
Yeah.
they'll be using them in their classes, so there'll be at least
Yes, that's the yeah.
that many sales.
Yes, a lot of people do that. and then it gets you a publication. You've got a book with an ISBN, so it looks good. Um,
Right.
yeah. In
So,
terms of, you asked about the printing, most of the books that we originally, I used to have a printer in Nagoya, but they were really great. But we found a printer in Korea that was just much, much, much cheaper. I can't remember
okay.
the name, but
Well, if you, maybe I'm going to ask you later if you remember the name.
if I can find any of my books, it's written on the back. But they're brilliant, and it's actually cheaper to print in Korea and ship them to Japan. What does it say in the back of that?
No, it's got English Books Japan.
What does it say? Printed by?
It's Nagoya Printing
Yeah, okay, that's
Company.
the old one. Hang on a sec.
Nagaya, yeah, that's the old one. I don't have the new one. This one, that's what it says. It's
I will find
Nagoya.
it and I'll email it to you. But again, they're a big company. They're not, the what I found is that when you print books, the very minimum that you can, I don't know how familiar you are with the printing process, but to the way things are printed, I've forgotten the real word, but a template has to be produced, and that
Right,
costs a lot of money. And so if you print one book, or if you print 300 books, the
right,
price will be almost the same
right,
because the expenses in that initial thing.
right. So
And
the price per unit will go down after
yes, yeah,
how
yeah.
many, like a
But
thousand
what,
books? What would you say?
it's not even that. It's the if you're going below 500, it's silly. The unit price will be ridiculous. The minimum that I would ever print is 1,000.
Right.
I've never printed less than that. Just doesn't
And
make.
since you're getting your books from printed in Korea, do you have any trouble with customs or
No, we've never had any issue with that at all. But again, EBJ deal with that now, so I don't deal with that.
right?
EBJ are great for this. They deal with all this.
Yeah, and I imagine the overseas printer would take care of the paperwork for getting
And
the
they do. Everything's dealt with, yeah. The only thing is that you have to write in the book where it was printed. So you have to write that it was not printed in Japan. I can't remember why, but there's some rule about that.
Yeah, I heard a story of someone who didn't do that, and
Right,
the
yeah.
books were stopped at
Yes,
the
yeah,
border.
yeah, yeah.
They
That's
wouldn't
it, yeah.
let them in, and they
They're
had
very
to
big on the made in Japan thing. You can't made
yeah,
in
I think they
Japan's
had
a
to put a
brand.
sticker on every book printed
Yeah,
in
that's it, yeah.
Korea.
Yeah.
So something to be
So
aware of. Yeah,
I think 1,000 books is a good guideline because you don't want to print too many because absolutely guarantee you that in the first run there will be mistakes. And you can it's very easy to find a mistake in a new book. All you do is pick it up and open it on any page and
right.
you find the mistake. It's just I don't know why it's just like how did I not see that? How did
Yeah,
we not
well, and
check that?
you get your proofreaders and your editor and
Yeah.
all of yeah, but
One,
still,
one friend actually gave me a rule years ago that has turned out to be completely true. The bigger the mistake in terms of physical size, the less likely you are to see it.
yeah,
So I've made mistakes with like section numbers and chapter numbers and stuff like that, because people are checking periods and commas and nobody's looking at the big stuff. So
right.
that's why you have to have a proper proofreader, somebody who knows how to do this.
Yeah, or someone who's completely new to it or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a
But you
fresh.
also have to go through it at different levels. You have to read it once, looking only at the big stuff, then looking at there's a way to do it, and
Right.
professional proofreaders can do that.
Okay. So with it's your company, so you pay for the printing, you pay for the
I
uh,
don't anymore. I used to, but
who
now
pays for the printing?
sorry,
Who pays for the printing?
EBJ.
English Books Japan. Okay.
Yeah, they
Okay.
paid because my books were already selling when they took over, so
Okay.
they knew what kind of volume they were selling.
So
And
if someone had a book and they wanted to approach EBJ, English Books Japan,
yeah,
and they're selling already, what would be like a negotiating point? Like I'm selling 100
Colin,
books, or I'm selling
I would
300.
get in touch with Colin Bethel, and maybe you can give out his details because you've got his email, yeah?
Yeah, I'll put it in the
Yeah,
video link. Yeah, but if
yeah. I
anybody's
mean, I'm
interested
sure
in,
if you tell them, yeah, I've got a book that's already selling, I'm sure they'd be interested, yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Do you sell books outside of Japan?
no, I've never done that. Again, I think I'm just lazy. I think I could have looked into that, especially with Korea, because the mistakes that Koreans make are very similar to the mistakes that Japanese make.
Okay, but you'd have to
So
change the explanations to
yeah,
Korean.
yeah, and I would have to get a Korean translator, and yeah, I've always been a little bit too lazy for that.
Okay, one last question before we head out. We got a couple minutes.
Sure.
AI.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of teachers, I went to a conference today and they're using AI to help check students' writing
Right,
and give feedback and then have like a polished version of
right.
the report. Do you think, how does that fit in with the, well, education in general?
It's
What
a
do you think
very,
of the,
very good question. I think anybody who tells you that they know, what's going to happen is lying to themselves and to you. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We really don't. It's only, I mean, it was only maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago, if a student used translation software, it was so obvious that it was comical, it was ridiculous.
right,
Um, One of my students is going to study abroad, and he had to write a letter saying why he wanted to go, and he showed it to me, and it was perfect. And I said, "You didn't write that?" And he said, "No, I wrote it in Japanese and got it translated." So, we're at that level now. And that's over the space of 2 or 3 years. Heaven knows where it's going to be. One of the things we do with the writing book that I was talking about before, the students have to use the patterns from the book.
right,
So they can't do it with AI because the AI doesn't know what's in the book. So if the students have written that, if they submit a completely perfect paragraph that has none of the examples from the book, then it's a fail because
right.
we know that they've used AI. But I honestly don't know. I think it's I I I don't know if it's the same thing, but when I was young, like I don't know how you're younger than me, but when I was young, calculators became a thing. When I was in school, electronic calculators, and people said, well, we don't need to learn maths anymore because now we have calculators, and that didn't turn out to be true at all. But AI is different. I honestly don't know. I think that what do students writing particularly do students really need to learn to write if they're doing it for joy, if they're English majors and they're doing it because they're interested, then maybe. But the old line of, when you work for companies, you'll have to send the emails in Japanese. That's all gone, right? Because it's
Yeah,
not.
it's not necessary. You can use AI to
Yeah.
do those for you. Yeah.
So I
I'm
think
gonna
all.
ask we have a few people in the audience. If anyone has a question for David, you can put it in the chat or turn your mic on. And
All people I know. I'm not. I know Tim's name, but I'm not. Yankee, I know. Hello, Yankee. Oh, Tim, I do know you. Yeah.
Hello. Yes, I attended one of your other presentations. I have
Yeah,
your
yeah,
name in
yeah,
that
yeah.
book. Yeah, yeah. Can I just ask? I enjoyed seeing the Welsh flag and the behind you there.
My wife put that over her desk. Yeah.
Oh, shit! One of the coolest flags in the world.
It is a great flag, isn't it? Yeah.
Can I just ask also, as a fellow polyglot and avid language learner, can I ask what 5 languages you're working on currently?
Oh, yes. I'm currently learning Welsh, French, Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic,
Fantastic.
and Italian, six.
Oh, and Italian. Fantastic. Oh, that's great. Great.
But no, I mean, not with any tremendous. I mean, Welsh and French I can get by in. The others I'm just kind of interested. And Arabic at the moment I'm just learning the letters just because it's
That's
very different. And
I can relate.
it is quite staggering to me how many language teachers are not particularly interested in language learning.
It
It's
is surprising.
it's bizarre.
It's very surprising. Yeah, because remaining a perpetual learner yourself, it keeps you in that mode
Of
of
course, yeah.
remember. Yeah,
That's why I
exactly.
do it. I don't particularly need to learn those languages. I do it because yeah, I need to never forget. You need to never forget that feeling of not just genuinely not having any idea what somebody said.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was really extremely informative. I really enjoyed it. Got all my questions answered. So
Thank
yeah,
you for taking
thank
the time on a Sunday night to join
you.
us. I thought it would be just me and John.
It was entirely my pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
And Yankee, I believe you have a new job. I believe
Oh, yeah,
congratulations on your
yeah.
day.
Thank you. I think Jackson told you
He
about it.
did tell me, yeah, at Gel, yeah. Where are you
Yeah.
working?
Daitaku University.
Oh, okay.
It's in Chiba.
Nice.
It's a private university. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you for making the connection.
I'm glad it was useful.
I have your red book on
The
in
air as
my
well, yeah.
in maybe somewhere here.
I think I can see it. Yeah. See it in your
Yeah.
background. Well, it's great. Great. It's nice to see people doing well.
It's nice that you're connecting people together.
I try my best. And Mike has been using the book for a few years, yeah? Do you use this one or do you use the red one?
I don't use the red one, just the green ones.
You
Hello?
use the green one, yeah?
Well, yeah, I use all the green ones. The
Right, okay.
basic plus and the compositions one.
Wow.
So for 3 different years. And
You'd probably be better at giving a presentation on this than me then.
yeah, I do. I've added a couple of things to it that I thought were quite useful. And
Ooh,
I can give you some feedback to your listeners right now.
yeah, please.
The reviews of the course are always very high. The students I'm a little more flexible with the time, so they work at their own pace, but they all have to have the same amount in by the end of the term.
Mhm.
Students really like getting feedback, so it's very easy to give that feedback if you don't have to keep looking for all the little mistakes. And all the students do first drafts, and then usually I have enough time to correct them. I don't do peer editing as a matter of course in the class, but what happens is they have to write their final drafts in the textbook, and they submit that, and anything that's in that book is what their grades are based on.
Okay.
So I don't grade the first drafts, I just correct them. So what happens is the students always make silly mistakes, like they know they don't, but they do, and they don't catch it. So they started peer editing on their own before handing it in, which is much more effective, I feel, than telling students they need to do it. And it's fun to watch. Like they're very careful, and they'll sometimes do 1 or 2 people will check it for them. So I really like to try and foster that. That was cool. And I'm getting really frustrated with the capitalization with the band names and things. The main problem, well, the problem is English is all screwed up now. There's YouTube spelling, iPad spelling.
iPad, yeah, true, yeah.
And now here come the Koreans with all their popular boy bands, and they're all over the place with their letter stuff too. So I'm almost ready to give up, as it just seems to be a stylized form of English when talking about Asian bands. So I don't know what to do with that. But one thing I have enforced in my class now, just to make my proofreading easier, is I've added a component to the manual you have at the beginning of your books, and that's a little brief thing on using the Hepburn system of writing, and that's helped a lot.
That's a really good idea. I should do that. That should be in the book. Thank you.
The main reason I do that is because all the interactions they'll have with foreigners will be basically that. All the international stuff is based on that. All the airports, all the national stuff, I mean, in Japan is based on that system.
But they still teach it in Shogako, and I don't understand why.
I know. I don't know why I'm still seeing it in university, so I'm not sure exactly when they learn the other one.
Elementary school.
Well, they do teach it in elementary school.
Yeah, they do. They still teach it.
Well, but university, oh man, there's so many kids coming and they still use the old system. And I felt a little guilty about making people write their names in that style, but then I thought, no, I got to keep this rule consistent.
Because you get like they'll write something like
well, Chitose is a good one.
Tetsuro, and they'll write Teturo. And then
and then their name will be mispronounced.
And people are going to call you Teturo. Is that what you want?
Well, exactly. So I found that really useful. I give them a little handout for writing their scores and stuff in, and that's one of those.
I might try and sneak that into the book. Actually, I think I might.
Oh, please do. That'd be cool.
And yeah.
So that's been very helpful, and it's and also the line thing. Did you say you're adding that into your next book, or is that just something you tell them to do?
No,
I've been doing that for the last year. Okay, good.
It's in the book. It's under layout.
Good. And you also, I've been getting on students for that are, because it helps with distinguishing between capital letters and like P's and Y's and stuff. And I said, you shouldn't do it that way. You got to do it this way. So I'm going to start being strict with that with formatting. And I grade 3 things. You have quite a comprehensive grading there, but mine's much simpler. I give 5 points for grammar and vocabulary, so that includes spelling, any mistakes they make with the verb tenses and articles and so on. everything. And then 5 points for content. Do they answer the question with clarity? Or whatever the topic is it everything focused on that? And then is the third one is the formatting. So if they're making mistakes with the formatting, capitalization, margins, writing off the lines and stuff, they can lose marks for that as well. And it's very simple and fast. But I'm the only one that uses it, so I have no one to compare with, really. But I'm looking forward to the new book, because I want to see how you do the scoring, because I want to change things. I'm tinker with it every year, and yeah, I'm looking forward to your new book anyway, because I want to see. There's some
It'd be great
some of
to
the things you mentioned tonight seem great.
be great to get some feedback on that. But I think the key is for every teacher to figure out something that works for them. And my idea is I'm going to put this in the textbook. It's there if you want it. If you have your own system, go for it. I'll write that in the teacher's manual.
David, I found one thing, those common mistakes that I see, if they're typing online or on a computer, I see kind of different types of mistakes in terms of like where they put the apostrophe or a space after an apostrophe,
Because
or
they're
no
typing
space after a period.
They're using Japanese.
Or
Right. They're
Japanese.
typing in a Japanese keyboard and it's not formatted correctly.
So
So
that's
that
right.
drives me nuts when I get something
That's
typed.
wrong.
In the
They
book,
can't do that.
in the book, I have 2 sections on layout, one for handwritten and one for computer. And the one for computer says it must be in Times New Roman, must be 12, 1.5 line spacing, all of that kind of thing. One of the crazy things that you still get native speakers doing, especially the older ones, is the double space after a period. And if you look in every Japanese textbook, it's in there. And I think it's because these old people remember the typewriter days.
Yeah. Any teacher over the age of 60,
Yeah,
you're likely to get that.
yeah.
And you'll see it in the ACAN or
Absolutely.
some
It's in
standardized
all of the
test
ACAN, yeah,
books
and
that
the school
very
books.
large space. Yeah.
Well,
I haven't seen that. I've always seen no space, like the not having a space.
that too.
Yeah,
They're
that's interesting.
they're writing in a Japanese font with the Japanese keyboard, changing it into English letters, and it's like, ugh,
What
Yeah.
bothers me is
English.
the tab key.
The
They
tab
don't use
key.
the tab key. They do like space
Right.
instead of
Yeah, that
leaving
messes
it.
up all the formatting. They have to use the command buttons or whatever you call them at the top. That's a whole class basically between that.
All right, I think we
So that's why I don't like
gotta
using
close it
computer.
here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry for keeping you so long.
No, not a problem. This will be on YouTube, so if you want to watch it again, I'll send the links to everybody
Yeah, please.
who came today. And thank you very much, David. It was a
And
fantastic.
if you could include the email of Colin Bethel, maybe, and the name of the Korean company, the printing company, which I can't remember.
Yeah, if you send that
I
to
will
me,
send it to
I'll
you, yeah.
include that in the video link. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you guys
And,
for joining
Thanks,
in.
David.
Hope to
Thank
see
you,
you again.
David. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
See ya.
Bye.